You've got to get rid of get rid of reasons to not do things. You have to invest in education. All of this the mayor and his team have done. That's why I'm here, frankly. This is the most consequential mayor in America today.
Wow. And this is the most consequential, or one of the most consequential people in tech. I should say one of, because I know if I say he is the most, I'm going to start getting text messages from some of my other friends. What are you doing? What about me with that little bird?
But I think, Mayor, the serious answer is you understand something about humanity, which is people are driven by excitement. They are driven by hope. They are driven by positive messages. And we are surrounded by negativity, prevention. You can't do this. You can't do this. You are a mayor of possibilities. That's why I'm such a strong...
Write that down, a mayor of possibilities.
Mayor of possibilities. And I really do believe what I said, and you and I have discussed this before, that America is a country of greatness because each and every one of us has the thought and the idea to go all the way. There's no other country where that is true. That's why I'm so proud to be an American and so proud to be here. Seriously.
Wow. So, I first of all, thank you. And I think we're all, and I said this was, I think it was my opening question to you, which is tell us your story. My story is, my parents, my mom was in the audience. I don't know if she's still inside here, but she came to this country at 7. My dad came at 12. He was a 9 to 14 kids. No money.
By the way, thank God we let them in.
Thank God. That's right.
You would not be here if your parents had not been let in. This is called immigration policy, and your mom is waving. Okay, she's the cutest thing.
So, my dad, who's a 9 to 14, emigrates to DC, and his father, who was an engineering professor at St. Thomas de Villanova University in Havana, Cuba, very Catholic, obviously 14 kids, no television, and
they were busy.
They were busy. My poor grandmother. But he says, I want my kids to go to the best parochial school in the city. So they take them to this small school called St. Anselm's, St. Anselm's School. I just came from St. Anselm College in New Hampshire. And my grandfather goes to the headmaster and says, I got 14 kids. I want them all to go to school here. I've heard this is the best school. There's only 2 problems. So the headmaster says, well, what are the 2 problems? So the first problem is, my kids don't speak English. He goes, what's the second problem? I don't have any money. So my dad went on scholarship, 12, learns how to speak English, takes the SAT, at 17 gets almost a perfect score, gets a presidential scholarship. They give 1 or 2 a year to Villanova in Philadelphia, studies mechanical engineering, graduates summa, gets 2 graduate degrees from Harvard, an MPP and a JD from the Kennedy School of Government and the Law School, and becomes the first Cuban mayor of Miami.
But that is the American dream.
It is.
Right. That is the definition of it.
It is. And then the origin story, his origin story, how he got here, right? His dad being a political prisoner under Castro's regime, his grandfather dying, and his brother dying in a Cuban jail because they were Christian Democrats and they didn't believe in communism. We believe in capitalism. Somebody was just saying outside, you have to have courage for capitalism. And, it's what we believe in here, the 3 pillars. You talked about freedom, capitalism, and dynamism. Can you expand a little bit about why you feel so strongly about those 3 pillars?
Well, I think freedom is important because the nanny state has decided that we can't say things. And I like a good argument. And I believe that adults should be able to say and do things that I don't agree with. That's called freedom. The definition of freedom is not you do what I want. That's called autocracy, right? Freedom is I don't agree with you and you can do it anyway. And freedom is more than that. It's freedom to think, freedom to organize, freedom to speak, freedom to create, freedom to do the things that you think as an adult will make the world a better place or are in your own interest. I'm in favor of all forms of that freedom, as long as it doesn't harm other people physically. Capitalism is by far the best way to allocate resources. I spent a lot of time in other countries which are quasi-socialist. And what happens is when a majority of the people are dependent on the state and not on the private sector, the government becomes economic rents. So what happens is the majority in a democracy wants to take from the minority, which in this case are the capitalists, all their money to fund even higher salaries and so forth. It's not how growth happens. So you want to make sure that you have a majority of capitalists who are then supporting the people who are older, younger, less fortunate, and what have you. And then dynamism Dynamism is actually important. It's called job creation, it's called corporate creation, and people don't appreciate it, but in America, dynamism is declining. It's not declining here in Florida, Miami. It is, however, declining around the nation, largely, believe it or not, because of land use, housing, dual income. People can't move, people can't uproot their families and try different things. It's a loss of freedom. You need all three.
As you continue your work, and I was saying that you're an anomaly because you were born in 55, my dad was born in 49, and your conversant knowledge of the most innovative technology beats people in my generation, frankly. How many people in the US, and I talked about this outside, and I mean, if you could like pinpoint the number of people, is it 1 million people, 10 million people? How many people do you think actually know AI at depth in this country? Is it less? Is it 100 people? I mean, how many people?
Well, it's more than 1,000 and probably less than 100,000. And in the government, the number is essentially 0 plus you. So, I didn't mean that didn't quite sound so bad. I didn't mean it to come out that bad, but it's like you and there's like nobody else. So, maybe we should add some more people at your understanding in the government. And this government issue is very important because these technologies have consequences, and government will be called to regulate, will be called to adjudicate, and it's an important function of government, and they won't get it right without getting technical people into the government.
And I think that's half of it, right? Which is we're going to have to regulate it, understand it, to regulate it, but also it's competitive on the competition side, right?
I know. One other thing for you to think about, you and I have spoken about this, is it, and I have to be careful not to be politically incorrect here, there is an age component. The fact of the matter is that the younger people tend to understand this stuff, and people my age, in general, don't. And it's not an age comment, it's an exposure comment. They haven't grown up with it, they don't understand it. We need those people to be in government.
And I'll tell you this, in fairness to the prior generation, to my father's generation, it's unfair because what's happening here, in my opinion, is a quad-generational disruption. What do I mean by that? Every 4 generations approximately, you have this massive economic disruption, whether it's going from an agrarian to an industrial society that takes about 4 generations, from an industrial to a digital, which is what we're in now. In my opinion, it's not just a generational disruption. In my opinion, it's a quad-generational disruption. You're seeing 4 generations being disrupted. So the one that comes in obviously understands it, but like, for example, and we said this on stage, my son is 9. The stuff he can do with my phone,
you'll
with my devices.
Especially without you knowing it.
My wife, I think, is around here somewhere. She's
all I can tell you.
She knows everything.
All I can tell you is that having daughters is God's revenge on men. And
I can tell you that.
So you just wait till she's old enough to really break your heart.
My daughter's best friend will not be an AI teddy bear. It will be her daddy. Okay. But she, it's funny. I just came back, like I said, from New Hampshire, and I woke up to, "Good morning, Daddy. I love you." And then I was like, "Oh my God, this is God talking to me," And she got into bed and cuddled with me, so it was unbelievable. I mean, and special.
And one of the technologies that's recent, has not announced yet, but it's coming very soon, is take 15 seconds of your voice, and then we can recast it into anyone else's speech. So 15 seconds of my voice was used to then have me give Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech.
Wow.
So
not quite as powerful, right?
Well, let's just say I wasn't as impactful.
Yeah.
But it shows you what is technically possible. And the impact on people, especially young minds, is going to be profound.
We didn't talk about this on stage, and I'm, my mind trying to figure out how can we fill the time with stuff we didn't talk about. But you just touched on one, which is the opposite negative aspect of that, which are the deep fakes, right? So as a politician,
you will face this because you're a target, and you're going to have to tell your constituents, everyone here, no, that was not me committing a crime. That was not me saying that. And you're going to have to, and they're going to trust you, and they do trust you, and that's clear. But the fact of the matter is that because you're such a good, if I may be blunt, retail politician, people will believe you, right? Because they'll say, I know Francis Suarez, and he's not like that. But you're going to get attacked with this technology, as everyone will, and I don't have a good solution for that. But we have to get ready for a world where a lot of the content that we consume has been generated. There was an article this week about a famous song that was generated involving 2 artists without their permission. if I were, as an artist, I would be really annoyed. And if I were their agent, I'd be really annoyed and I'd want the money, right? So we've got to sort all that out. It is coming.
It's scary, and I agree with the retail part, because when I first ran for office, I knocked on literally 15,000 doors. And part of it was getting to know people. Part of it was developing my platform based on what they wanted, not what City Hall wanted. But another part of it was the inevitability of if an attack came, they knew me personally, right?
But you could say, yeah, I actually met him.
Yeah, he's a nice guy.
He's actually okay. That's not true.
Yeah, but I will tell you this, having traveled across America and having sat in focus groups, the level of trust for American politicians is, I don't know if it's zero, but like maybe negative or
it's two below zero at this point.
So if
there is a presumption of evil when you walk in.
So if you layer on top of that this deep faith, I mean, and let's just take another corollary step, right? Which is not just the distrust of politicians, but the distrust of information and truth. And you layer on top of that, and I see Jane nodding her head. She knows when she's in the meeting. She knows what I'm talking about. If you layer on top of that generated falsehoods, I mean, how do we ever get back to the truth?
Well, we have to remember that truth actually matters, and facts actually matter, and that people who are serial liars should not be elected to office, right? I mean, just stuff like that. I know you agree with me. So we need to trust our government, and they need to tell us the truth. Speaking as your local resident, my position is just tell me the truth, Mayor. Tell me what's going on. I can deal with it. Whatever problems we've got, I want to work with you. Don't lie to me. Don't manipulate me. And yet what's happening is people other than you are using those tactics on both sides, by the way. This is not good, right? This is a polarization of our political movement. Democracies depend on basic human trust, and democracies are by far the best way to live. So we've got to get through this. But I would argue that the key insight is that if you have a personal relationship with people, you can overcome this. But if I were a politician, since I'm not particularly retail, I'd like make a bunch of videos and convince myself I was God or something like that, and then I would immediately be attacked for being fake, and I would deserve it.
You talked a little bit about sort of the weakness of democracy, and it reminds me of a Winston Churchill quote where he once said, "Democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others." Do you think this is happening? And I've read a lot on this, but I want your thoughts on it. If you're China, if you're Russia, if you're North Korea, if you're Iran, the kryptonite to democracy is division, right? Are they perpetuating division through our social media systems, through aggregation of data, understanding how to influence us? Is that happening right now?
There have been a series of cyber attacks and basically denial of service attacks and misinformation attacks from nation states. There's a well-known one in Russia in 2016, which Google detected, the White House detected, and so forth. I think the social media groups have this under some level of control. I remember when we first discovered this in 2016, and the most interesting thing about the attack was the attack occurred not during the day, when you would assume the voter who was speaking out in Kansas and Oregon and so forth, but rather on Moscow time. So that sort of gave it away, because people in those seats really do stay in.
Yeah, it's a bit of a giveaway.
Yeah, again, it's just stupid stuff like that. So I think I'm much more worried now, not about human attacks, but rather automated attacks, because it makes perfect sense. If you look at the Russian strategies with, I'll give you a good example of Black Lives Matter. The Russians used a set of techniques to promote both pro-Black Lives Matter and anti-Black Lives Matter marketing on different parts of social media, because all they were trying to do was to screw up democracy. They didn't care about Black Lives Matter, pro or against. And so we are going to face opponents who are trying hard to make our confidence in our democracy decline. When I go to China and I try to actually listen to the Chinese as opposed to tell them what I think, they say, our democracy is flawed, it's not working, it's a disaster. Our model in China is a much better model, it's much more effective, people are much happier. Of course, how would you know, since they're not allowed to answer the questions? But their internal rhetoric is that democracy is flawed, and it's in their incentive to prove that by destroying the trust in our systems.
I'm getting the wrap signal. I know you have a hard stop, so I just want to thank you. You are a treasure to the city.
No, well, thank you
so much.
But let me say one more thing. You made me welcome in your city. And I realized that, I figured, oh, I'm being special treated, and then I realized you do this to everybody, right? So that matters. Can you imagine me being treated this way in any California or New York City? It just doesn't work that way. And that's why you should be optimistic about your city, this state, and what you can do. It's because the government is there to help, and it starts with, I am welcome here. Thank you for welcoming me. Thank you, Mayor.